how do you come about structuring this film as opposed to the other? The project is also, they started filming what, for how many years? And this film gets made in? So it's years of shooting that, and that distilling process that sort of led to this film. If you could sort of talk about that a bit.
I think I'll start off talking about what you were talking about, particularly the tension in this film, because obviously we were very aware that the story is narrated. I mean, these people we've known for a long time, and they're narrating stories of love and longing. But there's also a parallel narrative of our love and longing for either the characters within the film in itself, and the city in itself. So somewhere I think there was a sense of restraint in trying to make the film, like while ordering the stories, which are very enjoyable and very playful, and it comes about by, I don't know, like talking to the workers in very often. But like the structuring of the landscape was to like pull you back from almost getting too close to the stories in itself. So somehow you have to keep on mediating between being very close and kind of getting a certain sort of an interiority of what it means to not just be from Chhattisgarh, Punjab and all of them, and repeatedly watching film clips, and yet not having anybody by the end of the night and to go back to, and what that city was forming itself into. So yeah, there was this meticulous kind of like back and forth between obviously Ekta and me, the editor, in terms of like how would we lay that out so we don't become kind of, I don't know, careless in handling those stories perhaps, yeah. So yeah, that was one guiding factor.
So you mentioned this tension of not letting us get into the comfort of the intimacy that you have shared, and constantly pulling back. But again, I'm going to sort of pull in knowledge that I have about all the things that have happened.
Surabhi has seen all the rushes and she's seen all my rough cuts. So,
but no, so one of the charges, which I find very interesting, one of the charges levied against this film and the project, in a sense, by the fraternity, was that, you know, as a documentary filmmaker, you are meant to carry a certain responsibility towards the person you're representing, and the intimacy that you give me and the audience access to needs to come with a certain baggage of making me sort of see him or her in their context and so on and so forth. And the fact that you have undercut that very, very dramatically is what makes this a difficult experience, which for me personally is what makes me sit up and really think about so many codes of the documentary filmmaker that we have sort of taken as a given. And so this was, you know, if I remember correctly, a lot of times the kind of criticism you got. When you were working on this structure, I personally know that the kind of, you know, relationship you shared with your subjects over so many years led to you being free in a sense of having to represent them in their entirety. And I saw that as a plus point. But when you were putting together this, trying to create this intimacy and disconnect, did you at all feel like you needed to sort of represent them fully, and or that distillation that you did by, you know, creating this, foregrounding the landscape at times and backgrounding that intimacy, or vice versa? Again, what were the conversations that led to this kind of a
I think there was
form?
a very clear thought in the sense like to give the full integrity to the conversations that we were having with the workers and to the city in itself, that there was not a moment that you could drop your own sense of cinematic experiences. So it had to be carried through as gracefully or as much as we could do. Because also, I mean, you know that we were not, I mean, we were also borrowing cameras from different people, so it really required a lot of we didn't have loads of footage as such. I mean, we were working for 5 years, but I mean, literally shot all of them as sequences that would go based on the conversations that we were having. So every conversation with the workers would give us some sort of encouragement to go back and view the city in a particular manner. And that would come back as, I think of documentary as a genre, not as something as, I don't know, a burden of truth or of any objectivity of that. I mean, yeah. I mean, I've worked with you, and
yeah, integrity is very important. Sorry.
No, I mean, there was not a single time it felt like that was a problem. At no point we never felt like that's going to come in the way. The primal conversation was how can we render these stories with utmost integrity and carry that through with cinema in itself as well.
The third question, again, I was sort of thinking that through when I was viewing it just now. And, it's I consider this a very political film. And it's a very interesting, you have forced a view of the worker through his or her interiority, which is seldom seen, right? You necessarily, the political notion of representing the worker is through a rights perspective, whereas you have sort of completely gone around that and gone into an interiority, which potentially could become very problematic, but somehow I am not too sure how you have managed to pull it through, but somehow the fact that this is a extremely, forcing me to view the worker in a very different political language is what strikes me with the entire project, actually. But actually in the screening, because I saw it on a big screen, I realized that maybe this is even more political than the previous one, in which you have foregrounded work, visually. Here you have foregrounded this dystopic landscape. There are trains and there are shadows and there's, of course, the workers' colonies. But it's I'm not sure how it's come together, but that's the sense I have. But with that confusion in my head about how it became so political for me, I'd open it out to the audience, and you don't have to pick up my confusion, but any your own comments could. Yeah, to actually give a context to the project that lasted 5-6 years.
The project is called Behind the Tin Sheets. We started it in 2009, and I think till 2014 we were making a lot of different films. I mean, the main project has 3 films: Intransience, Presence, and Distance. This is the 3rd film. Intransience looked at labor, the Presence looked at ghostliness and the ideas of haunting, and this was Love and Longing. There were many other little things that happened. But Ekta still continues to work with this as her preoccupation. Her next film is still tracking Pooja, Man's parents, and she's looking at the missing workers, some workers who have gone missing, so she's looking at ideas of separation through that. So I think it's carried on with us in many ways, yeah. It was also a project done while the metro construction was going on. The BMRCL was there in full force. It was a time when there were a lot of protests in the city about the green of Bangalore, the old green Bangalore, the new high-tech city Bangalore. So between those two ideas of Bangalore, we were like, there's something that's dividing our road, these tin sheets. And there are transient labor colonies, there are transient colonies and there are transient people occupying that space right then, right there. So somehow we wanted to be in that present tense and be far away simultaneously, maybe, yeah. So.
Also, just to add to that, I think what started off the project, if I may, was a sense of a complete loss of the city they knew. Yashi was going back to the city after a few years. Ekta, of course, was already there. And as she said, it was at the time when there were a lot of protests about the metro construction, trees being cut completely crazily.
I mean, so of my opinion, the whole project is illegal, the metro project. So when it brought down the city, I mean, it was a massive preoccupation, which continues to be in Bangalore. I
Yeah,
suppose.
but I think what's absolutely important is that this sense of loss of the city that was did not lead this project to any sense of nostalgia or wanting to hold on. Their way of making sense of that became a different animal and a really important intervention in the way one thinks about changing cities, according to me. Yeah.
First of all, the film was very nice. So, my question is, why are the lovers only from North India? Because, living in Bangalore for 11 years, I found that there were many workers working from all parts of the Karnataka. So, I did my graduation from Bangalore, so I found that there is a lot of people working other than North India. So, my question was, why are the lovers only from North India?
Actually, the Bangalore Metro project is actually, I mean, there are workers from across the country. Like when we used to go to the labor colony, I mean, like the Bayapnahalli labor colony, it's like 10,000 people. So one side will be Assam, one side will be Bihar, one side will be UP, one side is North Karnataka. So, I mean, and Telugu and everything. So, I mean, it was a very, it's sponsored by like 5 different companies. GICA is involved in it. It's a massive project. Most of the interviews are done on the last day the workers are leaving. So usually they'll be like, you've made a relationship with them and 2 months, kaise ho aap, and all of these conversations are going on, and then they're like, oh, we're leaving tomorrow. So then we'll run about, go get the cameras, come and do these shoots. It's a very transient migrant population that's building these big projects of India. Like one day Abhimanyu is building the metro in Bangalore, the next day a dam in Hyderabad, the next other day he's building something else. They're just continuously moving. This is a population that's always moving.
This is the film not only from a distance and loving lovers, but this is a film regarding how workers are working in dangerous conditions. You have showed through tea shed they are living. There must be porta cabins for them because this is very safe for them. If they are living in tent shaded colony, if any wiring cut, entire colony will be electrocuted. And I think whenever a film festival held, you organize, kindly invite government officials also so that they can see it. Thank you.
Was there a conscious choice that you made not to subtitle? Because there are these beautiful pieces which some of us will know and many of us won't. So how did that come about? And also like there is a referencing of Jeet and they do explain the plot a little bit. But for those who don't know Jeet, like I know Jeet frame by frame and dialogue by dialogue unfortunately. But so so I could like make so much more sense out of the connection and this longingness and this like तुम मेरी नहीं हो सकती तो किसी और की नहीं हो सकती kind of context that a country thinks in. Did you feel sometimes like while editing that oh I must explain this, or was there a process to it, or it didn't matter?
No, actually, while doing this film, we were also reading this essay by A.K. Ramanujam, who was like, hold some secrets. So we were like, there's explanations, and also like, it's okay to make up your own stories with all the frames and all the sonic language around the film. But some things are nice that you get it, and some things are okay if you don't get it.
Is that the final? Yeah, okay. This is the final. Sorry, no more last comments. Thank you, Yashu. Thank you, Subhashri. Thank you, IIHS, to
Thank you so
the
much.
whole team. And thank you to the little girl.